We begin with that breaking news. New details in the deadly shooting at a private Christian school in Madison, Wisconsin. Police saying that at least 2 people are dead, several others wounded. The shooter is also dead. Multiple law enforcement sources are now telling ABC News that the suspect was a female teenager. The shooting happened earlier today at Abundant Life Christian School, which teaches grades kindergarten through 12th grade. Madison's police chief calling today a sad day, not just for the city, but the entire country.
I think we can all agree that enough is enough. And we have to come together to do everything we can to support our students, to prevent press conferences like these from happening again and again and again.
The police chief says officers discovered the shooter dead inside the building. ABC News' Melissa Don has more.
Police and other emergency responders rushing to a school in Madison, Wisconsin, where police say a shooter opened fire.
Today truly is a sad day for Madison and for our country.
It happened just before 11 a.m. local time at Abundant Life Christian School. John Diaz de Leon lives right across the street.
I never saw so many police cars in my life, just blue and red lights lining the school, lining the street.
Calls came into 911 of an active shooter.
You could see students being let out of the school. Some of the older students were running across the parking lot to the church sanctuary. And then later on, very slowly, in a more orderly fashion, the younger students holding hands were let out.
The police chief says emergency workers were only about 3 miles away for training. Officers found multiple people with gunshot wounds and worked to secure the scene. They found the suspected shooter, a juvenile, dead inside the school. Officers recovering a handgun.
We know that the suspect shooter was a teenage student who attended the school. 2 other people have died. That died were a teacher and a teenage student.
Parents running into a reunification site to get a hold of their children.
I bring my daughter to school knowing, well, that this happens in the world, that people are struggling, and I pray for my daughter's safety.
I hoped that this day would never come in Madison. It is not something that any mayor, any fire chief, any police chief, any person in public office ever wants to have to deal with.
The police chief echoing that call to action.
I think we can all agree that enough is enough. And we have to come together to do everything we can to support our students.
We'll have more from Melissa in just a moment. But first, let's bring in ABC News contributor and former FBI agent Brad Garrett. Brad, how rare is it for the suspect? We have reporting now that the suspect is a female. Talk to us about that reporting and what we might know as far as the investigation going forward here into this suspect.
Well, to your point, it is unusual for a female to be a shooter like this, but not totally uncommon. I mean, I can speak generally when you look at violent crime, and particularly homicides and assaults. There has been an upward tick of females, not drastic, but the point being there seems to be more females stepping into traditionally male roles. Now, I will tell you based on experience that whatever happened to this female would have been similar to whatever would have happened to a male. As to what drove her, and obviously we don't know, but whatever drove her to go and commit such a drastic act and then take her own life, I mean, it really tells you that she was in just as troubled place as a male shooter might be. But, you know, the police will look at this case the same way. You're looking for evidence, you're looking for where the gun came from, you know, anything they can find out about her. Social media, friends, folks at school. Was she isolated? In other words, has she sort of dropped out away from people? That's one classic sign. Doesn't mean you're going to be a shooter, but it means you've really got something going on in your life. All of that will be looked at, and obviously the parents could be the real key. According to the police chief, they're cooperating. That's terrific. But what, you know, I think we're going to end up sadly seeing a picture painted of her maybe like so many other kids we've unfortunately had to talk about.
Just so hard to see and know that that investigation will continue. Brad, we know that the Gun Violence Archive reports there have been 112 school shootings where at least one victim was injured or killed this year. Guns are now the leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States. How concerning is this reality to you for the law enforcement community, and what steps has the community had to take to address the reality of this situation?
I mean, the problem is that if you're going to decide in a society to have 400 million guns available, and I'm not getting into an anti and pro gun situation here, I'm just talking about reality as to what I look at, what the law enforcement looks at every day, is that gun availability is that you're just statistically going to get more violence. And if there weren't so many readily available weapons, we'd have less school shootings. That's just sort of the truth. But we have chosen not to go that direction, and I don't agree, but I get that. And so this really boils down to how good you are as a school administrator, as a parent, as a close friend of somebody, to start seeing warning signs and tell an adult about them, not to overreact. Because many times when kids act out in a very negative, dark way, and I'm not talking about shooting, but just behaviorally, they need help. And clearly this child needed help.
Brad Garrett, so appreciate your insight on this. Melissa Dunn, I'm going to bring you back into this conversation. Melissa, we received a statement from President Biden calling this shocking and unconscionable. He said that he and the First Lady are praying for all of the victims today. What can you tell us about what we know about the victims so far?
Well, Elizabeth, so far about the victims, we had learned that there were 6 that were hospitalized. We had learned that there were 2 that were sent to the hospital with life-threatening injuries, and that there were students. Now, as for the other 4, we were told that they were also students, but they were sent to another hospital. This hospital, of course, these were students that were there with, they're saying, non-life-threatening injuries. But of course, Elizabeth, you can imagine that any sort of injury is just so difficult, right? Something that's going to be with them that we're going to be following, that's not just physical, but also traumatic. This is something that the mayor today also speaking about, the mayor of Madison, Wisconsin, talking about what a difficult situation right now their community is dealing with.
We need to do better in our country and our community to prevent gun violence. And I hoped that this day would never come in Madison. It is not something that any mayor, any fire chief, any police chief, any person in public office ever wants to have to deal with.
Obviously, such a traumatic experience that there were all these students, these teachers, the staff there in this school. And keep in mind here, this happening inside Abundant Life Christian School. What we've learned, it's a K-12 center. And it's a pretty small school. We're talking about 390 students, so very intimate class size settings, but on a large campus. What we've learned also in this about 28-acre campus, it shares with a city church and a pre-K. So this is pretty expansive. And again, that's going to be part of the investigation now, with officials trying to figure out how the student was able to get onto campus, how that student had a handgun on them, and how they were able to then essentially begin this shooting and start that active shooting.